Tonight, trying time. Bill Clinton gets ready for the fight of his life. War games. Did the Army make Quebec the enemy in a military exercise? And
I miss him a lot, and I can't wait to see him.
The children of a kidnapped Canadian get ready to welcome him home.
Sunday Reports with Bill Cameron.
Good evening. The jury was out today in Washington, out in front of the microphones and out on the airwaves. U.S. senators did a lot of talking about their roles as jurors in the impeachment trial of President Bill Clinton. The trial resumes this week. Republicans and Democrats have agreed on the basic structure for the proceedings, but as Anna Maria Tremonti reports, they remain far apart on one crucial issue.
They may have started the weekend under one harmonious Senate dome, but Democrats and Republicans are already publicly airing serious differences, divided over whether to hear from witnesses in the Senate trial of U.S. President Bill Clinton. The Republicans think witnesses are crucial.
I think, in fairness, for the presentation of a case in which we're trying to arrive at the truth, that some witnesses are legitimately required.
I have never seen a trial before where you had factual disputes, where you didn't have witnesses, where you could watch their demeanor on the stand.
Those views are being driven by the 13 conservative Republicans from the House of Representatives, the people who voted to impeach in the first place, who will act as managers or prosecutors in this trial. Prosecutors convinced Clinton must be removed from office.
He lied. He encouraged others to lie. He told false stories to witnesses.
Graham's list of witnesses includes Monica Lewinsky, Secretary Betty Currie, and presidential confidant Vernon Jordan, and may extend to other women rumored to be linked to Clinton. The Democrats, taking their cue from Clinton's own defense team, don't want to see that.
I don't understand why the House feels they have to sully the floor of the United States Senate when they didn't bring the witnesses before the House.
The Senate will come to order.
The entire Senate would have to vote on whether to hear certain witnesses, but the Republicans with the majority have a clear advantage. The Senate's unity is fragile.
We are in a bipartisan mode for the opening kickoff. Halftime is questionable, and if we go into overtime, all bets are off.
Watch for aggressive opening arguments as the trial resumes this week, and watch for another week of Clinton going about business as usual in an effort to show his effectiveness as president is not hampered by this trial. Anna Maria Tremonti, CBC News, Washington.
Some questions tonight about a Canadian Forces war game, one the military insists was a piece of fiction, nothing but a scenario to train personnel. But as Eric Sorensen reports, one that also pokes at some real political wounds in this country.
Could it ever happen that a military force from that side of the Ottawa River would engage troops on the other side of the river, turning the capital, Ottawa, into a potential battleground? It's part of a fictional scenario that was taught for 20 years to experienced officers by the Canadian Forces in Kingston. It just so happens that in real life, the Ottawa River divides Ontario from Quebec, and during that period, the threat of Quebec separation was not fictional. The Ottawa Citizen, which uncovered the exercise, says some French-speaking officers on the course were uneasy with a scenario that used Quebec geographically as enemy territory. This military analyst says it's an outrage.
That just adds to the sense of outrage that we Canadians should have as to why would we want to infect young Canadian military minds with the idea that war on Canadian soil is possible among Canadians. It's more than absurd. As I said, it's provocative.
But the Canadian Forces say there were many exercises and many locations. And while one used the Ottawa River as the border, the fictional enemy was called the Fantasians. And the officers were never physically more than 30 kilometers away from Kingston.
This is a tempest in a teapot.
Military officials say the Ottawa River was simply a nearby geographical feature that made for a natural border for teaching military strategy.
Quebec is never used in any of our curriculum material because of the maps that we need to use in order to set the scene for our exercises. The province of Quebec was maybe part of exercise, but at no time is Quebec referred to as a party, a player, or a participant in any of our exercise or any other curriculum material.
Other military authorities defend the exercises as a necessity for officer training, But they acknowledge that using Quebec's border with Ontario is politically sensitive.
A flag should have probably gone up and said, hey, this is pretty sensitive stuff, and it's going to get out. It's not classified. It's going to become public knowledge because, you know, umpteen students are participating in this exercise. So in hindsight, they're probably saying, nah, it wasn't a very good idea, and I would agree with that.
The Canadian forces also used Toronto and other areas as potential battlegrounds with the fictional Fantasians. But 3 years ago, the whole curriculum was overhauled. And while officer training is still happening in the eastern Ontario countryside, the maps they use now place the imaginary war games in northern Europe. Eric Sorensen, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Colombia, a right-wing militia is being blamed for massacring at least 100 civilians in a 3-day wave of violence. One of the worst incidents was in a village in northern Colombia. 27 people were killed there yesterday. They were at church attending a baptism. The killings signaled the end of a Christmas truce declared by the death squad.